Hi Sean, nice to see you.
Hey Sam, good to see you too.
Good to see you. So today let's have a chat. Let's get to hear a bit about you, a bit about your business, just an informal conversation to help some of those guys that are outside Ukraine that may be looking at opportunities here in the country understand more about what awaits them.
Yeah, great. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. So here with Sean Almeida, founder and CEO of Vestor.Estate. Let's start with a little bit of information about you. Where are you from?
So I'm originally from the Boston area, Boston, Massachusetts, yeah.
And what brought you to Ukraine? Do you have roots here?
No, I don't have any no Slavic roots or anything like that. I had started studying Russian several years ago after being exposed to it one of my travels, and I kind of wanted to use it, so I ended up finding a job in Moscow in 2011. So I worked there a little over a year, and then I was introduced to real estate in Kyiv, and I thought it was so interesting that I left my investment banking job in Moscow and came to do real estate in Kyiv.
Okay, and when was it you came here? What year?
I came here 2012, almost exactly 9 years ago today, actually, yeah. So this month was 9 years.
Well, 9 years in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
9 years. And have you always been involved in real estate in Ukraine?
I was here as a student before that. I had an internship, and I was a student studying for a whole summer here prior to 2012. But since I moved 2012, I went right into to doing real estate.
Mm-hmm. Always focused on real estate, right?
Yeah, always real estate, always kind of in the center, focusing on expat clients. So when I moved here, I worked for another company. It wasn't my own, actually. Mm-hmm. And I started off as a broker, you know. So I was mostly rentals, because at that time prices were quite high for purchasing. So we didn't have a lot of buyers. So I would actually go do the viewings, do the negotiations, do the contracting, and close deals, you know, all by myself. So people, you know, kind of think it was a little bit crazy to see an American doing real estate, but, you know, I thought it was a great opportunity to get involved from the ground up in the very historical center of Kyiv, and so I was glad to do it.
So an American speaking Russian in Kyiv selling real estate, right?
Yeah, no, I got a lot of reactions, just like, what are you doing here? Or it's still getting, like, you're the clients, you know, and sometimes I use it now and I'm like posing as a client sometimes for viewings, whatever, but back then, yeah, people just didn't understand and things like that. So it was interesting, but, you know, I just kind of ground through it, and it was I wanted to see how everything worked from the bottom up, and yeah, it was a very valuable experience, I would say.
So it was a very conscious decision to move into real estate.
Yes, yeah. So when I was visiting from Moscow, I'd met someone doing real estate, and they were pretty young, and I said, "You're doing it?" You know, I just couldn't believe that this person was allowed to do it without having a huge corporation or something. Because I know, if you know commercial real estate here, I know you know some of the expats who do commercial real estate. It's very developed. It's very competitive. You have leading global commercial real estate companies who are here. That's high competition. But on the residential side, I felt like there was very little, if any, competition. So I just saw an opportunity that if no one else is doing it, I'm, you know, happy to, you know, start doing it. And maybe, you know, the thought always at the beginning was to either, you know, to start my own business or something like that. And so I wasn't just starting off thinking I'll be a, you know, rental broker forever. So I definitely had bigger goals when I started. So
it was you saw an opportunity here in Kyiv and decided to come and get involved.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and I tell a lot of Ukrainians this, they're actually surprised. I tell people this, that, you know, Kyiv is actually a massive city. You know, geographically it's quite large. If you compare it to the US, I think something like San Diego, which is quite a sprawling city. And in terms of population, I think it would be the third or fourth biggest city in America. And I think the Ukrainians look at me and I think, I'm like, yeah, it's more like a Chicago. It's not like a small little town. And so I think the scale is here. It's not a poor city, you know, even though Ukraine has a, you know, low GDP per capita, and there's definitely issues with poverty here, and I'm very well aware. But at the same time, you know, looking to do a business, I felt that there was enough money and scale to justify, you know, jumping over and doing the real estate. Yeah. So
you touched on a few of them there, but what kind of issues do you see that are Ukraine-centric issues with doing business, particularly real estate here in Ukraine?
Yeah, there's always legal issues for bigger properties. For example, like buildings, you know, we've had quite a few investors come in and say, I want to buy a whole building, but usually those have been kind of fought over by various local powerful people, whether in the government itself, or some kind of more nefarious characters fighting over the properties. So when it comes to that, you kind of got to keep it on a lower scale. That's the first thing, I think. Also, it's a very low trust society, I would say, the kind of biggest comparison, even though you go around and it's really European city in a lot of ways, but when you get down to doing business, especially with real estate, which people are very sensitive about, that it's very emotional for them, because sometimes it's the only asset that they have, And in low trust society, it becomes very difficult to get any transaction done. You're trying to give them your money, and they maybe want to sell their place, but it's how you do that and the mechanism you use to make sure that they feel safe when they're transferring the property to you, and then they get their money, and vice versa. So the low trust part really makes everything much, much slower. Coming in and trying to buy 50 places in a month, one person. I mean, it's just almost, I'd say it's impossible basically, because you're dealing with 50 personalities, 50 scared people. Not a lot of trust with the banks and things like that. So I think that's the biggest difference.
So from a perspective of an potential investor that's outside of Ukraine, that maybe doesn't know very much or anything really about Ukraine, and they're looking in, maybe one of the first questions will be, is it safe for me to put my money in Ukraine? I mean, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, so I would say what we're doing is buying small properties in larger buildings. These are historical buildings, they're very solid. So when you're buying an individual property, the title rights are actually quite strong. So it's not something that someone could just go make a copy and then steal your property. And also the scale of it, because it's small and it's, not a huge factory that's producing some massive income that could have a raider attack on it or some kind of things like that, that gives you a lot of safety there. Also, it's the center of the city, which is not as wild as might be in the provinces and things like that. And also, generally speaking, as a foreigner, I know this is kind of a stereotype that all foreigners are being taken advantage of on massive levels, but at the same time, if you own a property, they're not going to come and try to attack your property, because then you easily get in the news and then it's bad for foreign investment. So they tend to kind of steer away from foreigners who own even if you own a few properties in the center that are spread out. It's not something that's a juicy target for locals who do nefarious things. Let's put it that way. So, we've helped dozens of clients purchase properties. We manage almost 30 properties right now of our own, most of which are rented out already, and rented out to other expats. So we haven't had any kind of major issues with raider attacks or the kind of legal challenges to ownership or anything like that. I mean, you got to be careful when you're buying, but it is, I would say, a very safe investment.
So that process of buying, there's a due diligence, I guess, which is conducted by your company, right, to make sure that everything is above board and as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, ultimately the notary who conducts the deal is responsible for making sure they do their checks. But we have legal partners we work with that do deeper checks and more informal checks, because there is kind of an informal system here of loans and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're checking things besides what the notary is checking. And then you look into red flags, for example. If something has changed ownership several times over the last even 20 years, if it's changed hands 3 or 4 times, that's a red flag for us. Maybe in America, for example, that might be very normal to flip it every 3 to 5 years and no big deal. But for us, that would be kind of a red flag. So we definitely would look deeper into that and look into family members sometimes who might have claims. You want to make sure that there's no court cases between the family members, which might actually end up affecting the deal later on. Maybe the deal goes through, but then there's some kind of claim. So we definitely dig deeper to make sure we're not just doing the closing one eye and doing some basic search. We don't want any issues later, because our goal for most of our clients is to renovate them and either rent them out or they live there themselves. Mm-hmm. So these problems don't go away, So any problems we create for ourselves later on, it's, I tell them, all my employees, I drill it into them that no deal is better than a bad deal, because a bad deal will haunt us and cost a lot more money than we can make on any one deal. So we're definitely very cautious when it comes to acquiring properties.
Okay. Well, let's talk a bit about the company. So Vestor.Estate, what year was it founded?
So there was a different iteration that was founded back in 2014, which was during the crisis, the Crimea problems, the war in the East, and things like that. So me and a partner at the time decided it was a good time to start a business, which in some ways it was. The business kind of evolved in a different way, to a different scale, and so about a year and a half ago, broke off on my own with this new iteration called Vestor.Estate. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but overall I've been in business for almost 6.5 years, I'd say. Yeah. Okay,
2014, when a lot of foreigners were leaving Ukraine and very few were thinking about investing.
Yeah,
and you were here starting a company.
There's definitely that, but then there is some, it's a Warren Buffett quote, I think, is when there's blood on the streets, buy. So we definitely had a lot of more brave investors coming in, but they had misconceptions. They think everything's super cheap and Ukrainians are going to get scared and sell all their assets and run away, and that just isn't the case. It's very hardy people, no matter what the problems were. There was riots downtown against the government, for I would consider legitimate reasons, but there was a lot of things going on. But Ukrainians don't panic and sell all their stuff. So a lot of those investors who were attracted found out that it's not super cheap and it's not super easy. But definitely the prices started to go down for purchase, so we definitely started to see that. Rentals was always relevant because actually more foreigners came, more technical assistance staff, embassies. The U.S. Embassy was brand new at that time, I think. It was much larger than they needed, and now it's undersized. European delegation sends a lot of people. OSCE, various organizations send more people. So on the tenant side, definitely kind of increased, I would say, for good expat tenants. So
So that's really who your target profile is for tenants, people working for example, USAID or the United Nations or different diplomatic missions.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the diplomatic missions are in the center. About half of them, I would say, most of the European ones. Then, of course, various international organizations, political ones, the Red Cross, like you said, USAID, things like that. So what I found was when the tide pulled out with 2014 and all these things going on, a lot of business people left, a lot of maybe private entrepreneurs, foreigners who had small businesses, they found out that tide goes out is really tough. But when the tide goes out, you see who's remaining. And what was really solid was the foreign tenants. Their budgets maybe decreased a little bit, but they didn't just go, oh, everything's super cheap. Now they kept their rental budgets the same. And so I realized that that's kind of a bedrock of the investment case overall. So since we know what the budgets are, who pays what, and how many of them are, when we're buying, we try to envision who the person is before they're going to live there, rent it out, before we buy the place, if it's an investor. For people for themselves, obviously, they have different tastes and things like that, it's fine. But for the investors, for sure, we don't want to buy something and just hope or guess and overestimate. Or I've seen people out renovate the building where the building has a limit. It's an older building, you might get this rent, and they try to do a super fancy renovation thinking they can get twice the rent, and it's not the case. You cannot renovate the building. So, yeah. But overall, your point is correct that the bedrock of our investment case is the foreign tenants with budgets paid by the organization, embassy, and such.
Right. Okay. So that rent is pretty secure, right? Because it's coming from that organization.
Yeah, it's very secure. It's funded years in advance sometimes, so they don't.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. They're living there 2-3 years. They're not trying to, retrade every 6 months. Oh, the market's going down. Mostly, they just kind of keep the rent the same. They want stability. For them is important, And so for the investor or owner, that's what you're getting too. You're providing stability, and by having a nice apartment that's managed and things like that. But they're providing the stability because they don't want to change apartments just to save even 20%. It's just not a motivation for them because logistically it's difficult. If they had children, especially, they're here for the long term as well. So.
Yeah, they're often contracts. These guys are coming in 2, 3, 4 years, right? So
yeah, I would say
stability.
Yeah, exactly. I would say the average is about 2 to 3 years. I mean, it varies, and then sometimes the bigger families because they come here the kids go to schools here, and they don't want to move any often, so they can stay as long as 4 and 5, and I've even heard of 6 years, which is rare, but it definitely happens. So the bigger families, which means bigger apartments, tend to stay longer. Individuals tend to come here for a year, maybe 2 years, and then if you have a young couple or one kid, then 2 or 3 years is definitely kind of the standard. So. For sure.
And what about you? Already 9 years here in Kyiv.
Yeah, 9 years, but
how long do you stay?
I'm not the stable tenant, maybe, because I was single for a long time until last year. So I think I've lived in 9 years, maybe 10 or 11 apartments. Just kind of trying different parts of the city, different kinds of buildings, new building, old building. But now, we're in a current place for a year. We got at least one more year there. So now that I have a family, I'm definitely more of the stable client people are looking for sure.
So you foresee yourself staying in Ukraine for the foreseeable future, no doubt, having built a business here?
Yeah, for sure. Every year I tell people I'm just getting started, and it's always true. I believe it. There's a lot more to build on, because the real core issue here is a lack of housing overall. I mean, the expat housing is definitely lacking because a lot of the owners either don't renovate for years and years or decades, or they have a different style, maybe more gaudy or more extreme that the foreign tenants, European tenants especially, like more neutral. So it doesn't match up. So we're trying to solve that problem, and we're chipping away at it with 30 properties, and I'd like to get to probably 200. I think that would be a very stable business. But again, the overall issue is that there's not enough housing at all in this country. I think it was the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure, he was quoted as saying that at the current pace of development in the country, it would take like 80 years to reach the square meters per person they have in Europe. So in Europe, it's about 50 meters per person on average, throughout, Western Europe. And then Ukraine, you have about 27 meters per person.
Okay, so half.
Yeah, there's just not enough meters per person at all. So it's such a deficit that I feel like I could, once we kind of have maybe built up our expat portfolio to a way where I think it's diminishing returns, which of course happens in any business. I think in a few years, I think providing housing to local, there's a lot of IT people who are missing housing. They tend to like smaller places, but For sure, there's a middle class, younger couples, have kids. They want a nice, clean apartment. They're hard to find. They're paying. You should see the prices sometimes for locals. It's not as cheap as people would think it is. So, I think moving on to bigger scale would make a lot of sense. And there's no. I don't know if you have this in UK, but in the US, it's huge. Of course, the apartment building where you walk into the rental office, and they just show you a few that are available, and you take one. I mean, it doesn't exist in Kyiv. And the city, that building flexibility for when things ebb and flow. There's some out migration, new people coming in. People come for a couple of years, they don't have money to buy an apartment. So it really, it's kind of a part of the ecosystem of a normal functioning city. And in this city, they don't have it. A city of 4 million plus people does not have this kind of massive building with 120, 200 units that are always for rent. So I think in the future, it doesn't have to be in the center either. It could be anywhere, maybe near a metro, outside the center, to provide housing to locals, And I think definitely would be very interesting. It's bigger, and our company I think is growing up to handle something like that. But I think in the future that's something I think about very often. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go check out the bedroom first. Huh? So our concept here was to have kind of a really nice suite in a really nice hotel. You get this nice large bedroom, the beautiful lighting everywhere. Also, clients never complain about too much storage. So we go ahead and do floor-to-ceiling storage closets here. The lights come up.
Fantastic wardrobe,
The
right?
lights come on automatically, and then they go off automatically. The doors close themselves, so you don't got to worry about that. Slamming and everything else, all throughout.
Wow, very impressive. Huh?
Lots of room for storing shoes or whatever else people.
So you say you can never have too much storage, right?
I've never seen it, never. So.
These mirrors are fantastic as well, right?
Yeah, it gives you a lot more space.
Mirrors.
Yeah, it gives you a feeling of space too. And every room has a air conditioner, of course,
So you mentioned that you have 30 companies there, 30 properties by your company which are under management. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit more about that? So the different segments of your business, how you're focused on managing properties as well as acquiring and the different segments of the business.
Sure. So like I mentioned, the rentals is kind of like the bedrock of the investment case, but the process kind of works in reverse. So we have a client come to us, I'd say 80% of our clients, our buyers, are investors. They want to buy something. If they have to, they'll renovate it, rent it out, collect the income, and enjoy it for a few years, maybe sell in 3 to 5 years or more. So basically, client comes to us, we make our case, we talk about budget, things like that, and then we locate a property that we think is good. And obviously, if it's completely trashed, the price should be obviously commensurately lower, but it's more about what we see at the end. We see like if this place is renovated, we believe you can get this rent. So again, even though it's not rented yet, the rental numbers are going to be really important at the very beginning. So my sales team actually talks to the rental team always and says, "Hey, we're looking at this place. Look at the location, the floor plan. If we do a renovation, how much do you think we can rent it for?" It's always checking back in because we might think it's in the same location as another place that rented for X dollars, but really it could be an issue with the building, neighbors, street noise. So it's really block by block. So once we found a place that we think makes sense. We can even talk to the design team and say, what do you think the renovation costs are, which we approximately know in general, because usually we replace everything. We rarely find a place that has much that's salvageable, maybe some wiring and pipes, but most places we're gutting everything, including what you can't see. So this is what you see in an apartment like this, but there's a lot that you can't see, the infrastructure, the pipes and things like that we end up changing as well. So we put the numbers together, investor says give it a go, we go through the sales process, acquire the property. Then the design team takes over. They start doing their thing, communication with the owner, or hands-off. Some owners are more hands-off, where our design team can just, we're getting the budget obviously at the beginning and what it's going to look like at the end, but our team can handle everything without the owners being here. We have construction teams, designers, people handle the deliveries of all the materials, things like that. So we can handle it from A to Z. So then a place is completed with their design. And then it kind of goes into property management rental. So the property manager will take over, make sure the bills are paid and it's been keep cleaned while the rental team is doing the viewings. So they're offering it to all these organizations we mentioned that we work with directly. If we don't work with an embassy or organization directly, the rental team also works with other brokers who work with the people directly. So often there's 2 brokers on a deal, the tenant and the owner side. So in that case, work for the owner side, we're marketing the property everywhere online, we take good pictures, we can do videos, we have floor plans that show everything, so we do comprehensive marketing of the property. We get the viewings, then we get the offers. We agree on the terms with the owner. Then it moves more strictly to property management, which includes handling the payments. So if the owner is a foreigner not here, again, they want to be hands off, we can collect the rent on behalf of them with the proper powers of attorney and documentation and such. We collect the rent on their behalf. We take our management fee. We pay their taxes for them, because foreigners who don't have residency cannot pay taxes, actually. Okay. So if you're living abroad, you cannot collect money to an account here and pay taxes, or collect it abroad and pay taxes here. It has to be received here and taxes paid here. So we would be it's called a tax agent in Ukrainian. So we pay their taxes for them, and then we send the profits either to their account here, their accounts abroad, or wherever. So we're exported. So at the beginning we're receiving all the funds, and at the end we're sending all the profits abroad to their account. And there you go. And then the property management takes care of any issues that arise. You know, it's often, I call it sometimes client management more. Clients, they come from foreign countries, they don't know how the system here works, they don't know how to pay utilities, they don't understand why this is happening. Maybe neighbors are causing problems with noise, and so we want to keep the client calm, to keep them there for a long time. So that's where the professional management actually really makes a big difference. To keep the tenant happy, they need something extra purchased for the apartment. Usually the owners are amenable to buying small toaster, things like that. So the goal is to keep them there as long as possible and keep them happy. So
these different sections of the business you're talking about, you've got the sales team and the rentals team and the design team and the property management. This is all under your roof, right? All in your office? Yeah,
this is all in-house. The only people who don't have in-house, it would be the actual construction workers. We have some general contractors we work with that we know and trust, and they're responsible for doing all the stuff you can't see, and the design team does what we can't see. But everyone else, the design team is a 4-person team. So at one point, I think we had 14 properties renovated at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, so we can do some scale.
It was a busy few weeks.
Yeah, they overlap in different levels. Renovations can be busy at the beginning or the end, and in the middle they're smooth. But yeah, it was a bit of a dance, but we have the capacity to handle that. And we're all under the same roof physically too. So, we walk over different departments, say, hey, what are we looking at this? What do you think? Also, the design might go to rentals and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. We have 3D visualizations and renderings, and we say, what do you think, the tenants will like this or not? And then the rental team has a lot of power. They say, listen, I'm gonna have a hard time renting it with that color, that layout or whatever. So we're getting constant feedback, because every year things change too. You think one year there's this trend or tendency in the market, fashion, and then so we want to make sure we're always on top of everything. So constant feedback. Yeah.
So that's why you tend to go for pretty neutral apartments, like we see here, right? Fairly neutral colours, which are in fashion, have been in fashion for quite some time, right?
Yeah, but a lot of tenants, they have their own thing. They want to put their own touch on it. And I think that a lot of local owners who do the investment thing and they want to rent to foreigners, they put their touch on it and then want the foreigner to like it. And it's a completely different thing. So having restraint, I jump in on the design team sometimes and also push down there, because they're artistic people, and I understand that, I appreciate that, but at the same time, the tenant's going to want to live there and put their little touch on it. They're painting, they're whatever. So the more neutral it is, the more likely you can see them moving in and saying, you know what, I can put my touch and make it home. The house is not a home, right? And so someone else's design apartment with all these little bric-a-brac and things everywhere, kitsch everywhere, it might actually ruin a deal for the tenant who wants to feel at home while they're living in Ukraine, for sure. Yeah.
So how many people are working for Vestor?
So total we're 17.
17,
yeah,
okay.
Including myself. So that's the different departments, plus we also have accounting and we have marketing. So a little more kind of back office stuff, but at the scale we're at, we have, every team has more than one person at this point too. Not all, not all 4-person, like the design team, that's the biggest for sure with the scale, but, and we have more room to grow as well, for sure. I'm always try to take employees and grow them within the business. Sometimes they get doing something, maybe it's a little bit boring after a year, and I say, okay, do you like the sales part? Do you like the rentals part? So management part, for example. So I always try to grow people from what they're doing into something bigger, or a lot of the teams I have, they started off as individuals and now they're team leaders, for example. I try to, I was a Marine way back in the day. And we learned in the U.S. Marine Corps, it's very big, is pushing responsibility down. Doesn't mean getting rid of it, because you're still responsible for people under you, but the point is to give young people chances to make mistakes and to learn and take responsibility and see what that looks like. And I think you mentioned before, what's the difference here at business? I think as a business owner, I encounter a lot of, oh, it wasn't me, I don't know, even from grown people, from adults that you think are really, really grown up, that when things go bad, they don't want to be blamed, and they just go, oh, it wasn't me, I don't know, and pointing fingers. And asking anyone on my team, I don't yell. I'm pretty calm, but that one thing gets me really upset is when people don't take responsibility. So I push it on the team leaders to take responsibility for mistakes. And if someone under them made a mistake, then they can do the same with them. But I think it's important. So I'm trying to grow a business here, not just have some kind of one-man show, one-man shop at all, which I've seen a lot here too. They call it the squirrel syndrome, where you're kind of running on the wheel and just doing the same thing over and over. I don't want to do that. I think my goal is that I can take a month off, 2 months off with my family in the winter, and go to Thailand or something, and know that the business is still running without me. So I think that's kind of part of a different philosophy, and I hope our clients see that when they talk to someone they think is maybe 23, 24, and maybe not up to it, but then they see that that they do have responsibility and are competent as well. So. Yeah.
So you already said that you're providing really this full service for your clients, a turnkey solution, if you will. So who are your typical clients? You said they're foreigners. Are these often guys that are based outside of Ukraine?
Yeah, I would say more than half of our clients do, maybe 2/3, I would say right now, of the owners, let's say, do not live in Ukraine. A few actually had never been to Ukraine, believe it or not. We've had people, based on the words of others, never come to Ukraine and just buy, because we also have an escrow company set up separately, which, based on an escrow contract, the money comes into the escrow account, and all the funds are distributed on the day in dollars to the sellers, to the lawyers, to the bank fees, to the notary, to the agency for the commissions and stuff. So we have it all set up where everything can be purchased remotely. It's just a question of trust. So obviously, I don't expect someone who never talked to any of us to just go send money. Obviously, it's not like that, but still, people based on other words and seeing the success of their friends or family members have also gotten involved. So the typical profile, I would say mostly West Europeans at this point. We've had obviously some Americans and others. We had interest in the Middle East, from Asia, and things like that. But I would say the bulk would be from Western Europe. People are quite well-to-do. A lot of them have done these kind of investments before. Actually, they started maybe in the Baltics about 15 years ago. They saw some good appreciation there. They've also done things like purchase places in Budapest and Prague and seen good results there. But over time, you see that there's compression with the yields. So maybe they bought and it was 8 or 10% yields before, and then purchase prices rose and rents might have dropped a bit. So now they're down to 4 and 5, maybe 3%, which is not much better than what you see in Paris, which is about 2%. So I don't know what it is in UK, and in New York City, I think it's also about like 1.5%, 2% is pretty standard.
Barely beating inflation.
Barely beating inflation, just hoping that depreciation in the future will outrun all the costs and everything like that. But so a lot of our buyers are quite experienced. Actually, very few of our buyers are their first-time buyers. Very few of them have not bought in other emerging markets and things like that. It's just kind of maybe this cascading effect where, with modernization of Eastern and Central Europe, that you see that the next big fish is this 35 million person country with 4 million person capital city that has quite a bit of wealth. I know it has a reputation as a poor country, but I don't believe this is a poor country. I think the funds are often going to the wrong hands, not equally distributed by any stretch or anything like that. Not that I'm, think I should be totally equal like socialist, but I mean, I'm definitely a capitalist, obviously. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of the money is not getting to a lot of the people, and so that's the reputation that it has. But there's a lot of money in this country, and as we see things develop, IT new sphere that came out, we're going to see, I think, an emerging middle class of younger people, not just the kind of robber barons of the 90s who have dominated for a long time.
So what kind of rental yields are realistic for an investor to expect from Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, on average, we've achieved 11% for the places that are rented out. This is gross rental yields. It's really going to depend on how much renovation they're willing to do usually. I mean, you can get a place that's quasi-renovated, fix it up, and get 6 to 8%, I would say, quite easily. It's not that difficult to do. If you want to get to the 9 and 10% range, definitely need to be probably doing a renovation, but that would you'd probably be stuck around 9 or 10% if you're buying a smaller place. If you're buying a bigger place, our best yields we've seen are, let's say, 90 meters and above. Actually, there's a lot of demand among 2 and 3 bedroom places, and that's where we've seen 12 and 13 and 14% yields that bring our average up to 11. So it really depends on the overall budget. It's not something you can't come into the center of Kyiv with $50,000 budget and expect to get 11%. It's not going to happen.
But that 11%, you say that's an average over your entire portfolio?
Yeah, it's an average of the portfolio that we currently manage, yeah. So it's definitely realistic. It's dependent on budget. And I know one of the drawbacks here, probably people watching this video might ask, like, what about credit? Because I know like credit is the absolute fuel that keeps the U.S. real estate market going. It's an oil or a fuel that really, it wouldn't work otherwise. And so here, unfortunately, I had a client call it dead money, where it's all cash and you're not going to be able to get good mortgage rates. And they're going to be, for locals, they're talking about 7%, but that's a special program actually. If you're a foreigner wanting to come in, I don't think any banks can give you less than 10 and probably higher. Then we can go check out the bathroom here. So here we have the washing machine, its own cupboard. Mm-hmm. And then above we have a hot water boiler. So you have your own hot water and don't depend on the city.
Yeah, you keep them hidden away, and it really has that feel of like a hotel bathroom.
Yeah,
right?
that's it. Yeah. Aesthetically, it looks better too. And then we did separate bath and shower, because you never know what the client's going to like. Yeah. So they have flexibility here.
Yeah, it's a lovely walk-in shower.
Yeah, nice walk-in shower. It's kind of pretty rare in Kyiv actually to have these walk-in showers, but tenants really like them. So.
So for foreigners outside of Ukraine looking to get involved, are there other financing options, credit, mortgages that they're able to access here in Ukraine?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the biggest questions, biggest problems, I'd say, is that you have to be all cash at the moment, really, to capture the good properties. There were mortgages before at quite low rates, and it caused a huge bubble here, as all around the world, basically in 2007, 2008. I've heard it many times. People would say, "Oh, they were offering me $10,000 a square meter for places in historical buildings," which I believe that's about the average price in Paris, for example. But that was a massive bubble, and then there was a big shift down in prices, and credit was still available a bit, and then with the Maidan and everything else, basically credit went away, and the banks really got underwater on a lot of properties. They foreclosed on. They weren't able to unload the debt and get back their money. So the banks are a bit scarred. So they're not really leaning towards providing any financing at the moment. The government just in the last few weeks has pushed through this program where locals will be able to get maybe 7% interest rates on their mortgages. But there's a lot of nuances there. It can only be so big. It's up to $70,000, I believe. And you have to qualify for it, so it's not going to be some widespread thing that's going to really juice the market. But if you're a foreigner coming in, unless you could secure financing from somewhere else, whether your family and friends back home or some kind of very brave bank that you might have in your hometown or something like that, when you come to Ukraine, you're not going to be able to find financing for a real estate purchase now.
So it's cash-driven, investors that are coming in with cash.
And that's cash-driven. I think in the future, of course, one of the major drivers of future prices will definitely be credit, not just for expats, because there's locals also who have some cash and they want to use credit, but with the rates, if you don't qualify for this program, the rates are actually in the teens, maybe 10%, but then there's all these fees that they throw in there, loan origination fee. That basically makes the best case scenario low teens interest rates. So I don't think it's something that's going to drive prices in the near future. But obviously, when banks start to get more comfortable giving out mortgages again, it'll juice the real estate market. But I think overall the economy, it's really pulls out a lot of money out of housing. People take loans, they pay it back, but then they can use it for other investments in the country besides buying a home. And so I look forward to the day, but right now we're making do with what we have. So.
Right, okay. So you're saying those yields averaging 11%, but the mortgages on the other side would really nullify any yields.
Yeah, if you took out a mortgage, it's not going to increase your yield. Obviously, if we can get something 6 would be on the high. I think ideally 5 or maybe 4. In the future, if you can get those kind of rates, it can really juice your yield up from 11 to even higher. But at the moment, just cash on cash here.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about go back to the business. So you've talked about the different sections of the business that you have. Which is the one where you focus the most time and the most attention?
Well, now, because I built the team, because I have competent people and multiple people per team, I think the thing I focus on most now is marketing. It's why we're sitting here today, and we're doing pushes all across to really get the word out about what we do. Because I think we started off this is why I changed from the iteration of the previous company to Vestor.Estate, is that the previous company was an agency. real estate agency, you know, a realty, let's say. And our skills grew so much that the realty part, the brokering part became, it's still a significant part, important part, but it's not the majority of the business at all. So my main task right now is working with my marketing team and getting the word out about what we do, the fact that we have different departments, the fact that it's all under one roof, that we all work together, you know, it's really a team, you know, and, you know, it's not always, you know, you tend to have kind of animosity since you have teams at how much they make and how much we're making, but you know, I've really said, you know, they might make more or less, but you're going to make less if you don't work with the other team, you know, for sure. Everyone really does better when they're working with other parts. So definitely the marketing is a bigger part. And after that, I would say improving the systems, the processes between the teams. Within the teams, they're great. They're really competent. It's just the communication when it's shift, you know, property goes through multiple phases and making sure that it's as smooth as possible, you know, that there's not as much miscommunications about who should be doing what during the transition. Is someone who's responsible for having the apartment cleaned? Is it the design team or the management team? Things like that. So definitely improving the ties between the departments is definitely the second after marketing.
Okay, so that's you personally. You're very much focused on the marketing, no doubt client relations as well, speaking with the customers.
For sure, but less and less so now. I mean, they're starting to see videos that we made that are all over YouTube. There's a lot of information, more detailed information about different aspects of real estate. So people kind of feel like they already kind of know a lot of stuff before they even come to us. So I'm definitely having a lot less to meet up with direct clients. Of course, the previous clients, I'm definitely working with them that I worked with before. For sure, client relations is definitely, I'd say, number 3 after the first 2.
So out of the teams you have, which of them, I'm sure they're all busy guys, but which of the teams are the most busiest? Where's the most demand, if you will?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really ebbs and flows, I would say. With COVID, it obviously has skewed the market heavily away from rentals for now, because right now Europe is on lockdown. So we expect this month it'll release, and then all these tenants probably will come rushing back. So rentals will be really busy. Design has this kind of steady busyness to it because rain or shine, COVID, no COVID, we've been able to keep the renovations going. Sales is a bit seasonal, the holidays, but we're getting busy again now that the New Year's holiday is over. It's kind of because we were really busy beginning of December, and then it gets quiet for a while. Management is also pretty busy all the time, to be honest. When you get 30 properties, there's always plugging a leak somewhere. You stick a finger in, you know, it's like a little bit of a cartoon. Sometimes it feels like, you know, fixing little small issues. Luckily, nothing, you know, structural or anything like that. But management also is quite busy.
Changing light bulbs and
things like that. Paying bills. You know, you got to pay 30 bills, and it's not easy to do here. You can't just. It's not as systematized as we would like to pay the utilities online. So 30 properties is a bit tedious to go through and stuff like that. So.
So this is association game. So how, not necessarily related to.
Yeah, no. It may be for just.
All right, let's do it. I'm not sure how you can use it in the video, but okay, I'm okay.
Yeah, we'll do it anyway, and then you've got it, and you can do. Okay. All right, we'll keep this here so I don't have to look down.
Everyone's gonna be laughing, I think. So.
Okay, good. Okay. So Sean, let's play a little game, a little association game. Okay, so I'll say a word and you tell me the first thing that comes into your mind.
Okay.
So COVID.
Disaster.
Podil.
Underwater.
Zelensky.
Comedian.
Pain.
Good.
Ukrabud.
Bankrupt.
Are they really? Yeah. You see their signs on buildings everywhere, right? But
they're bankrupt.
USA.
Great.
Okay. Now we'll move on to some neighbourhoods in Kyiv, right? Okay. What do you associate with these neighbourhoods? Trojeshina.
Gangster.
Podil.
Underwater.
Olisivska.
Huge.
Pozniki.
No, I know where that is.
Left bank.
Left bank, okay.
You drive past it on the way to the airport.
Okay.
Vinograd.
I used to live there.
Downtown.
Traffic.
Super. Nice.
Okay.
What did you say with Zelensky?
It's a comedian, yeah. It's like.
A wee bit rich. We
We kind of like, we look for properties and we just match them with the clients we have at the time. Where the red roof is, we own an apartment there as well.
Yeah.
That's where Kasaka is.
Right,
So on the left, it's like if you go down there.
Yeah, I know.
That's right,
Sometimes
yeah.
I run down there. Actually, I know where that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you have to cross the.
Yeah,
Pull
exactly.
off at the pavement.